Call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of a Committee of the Whole meeting of the Bloomington Common Council for Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. On the agenda, we have one item, Ordinance 2311. Here to present on it is Director of Public Works Adam Wason on amending Title VI of the Bloomington Municipal Code to update and increase fees for service and harmonizing Chapters 4 and 5 of Title VI of Bloomington Municipal Code. Mr. Wason, welcome to our show.
Good evening, members of council. Adam Wason, once again, Public Works Director for the City of Bloomington. Always a privilege, pleasure, and an honor to be before you. Tonight, I will be presenting information and data on the Sanitation Division of the Public Works Department that will show that we are in need of adjusting the rates for these services to meet the challenges of rising costs. While I know this comes with a need for serious consideration and that no one ever wants to ask for fees or rates to be raised, we're simply in a position that requires us to ask for an increase of rates for sanitation for eligible households and residents that are serviced by the City of Bloomington. While I and staff do not have a major preference on which fee model is selected, based on what we've heard from several of the council members individually over the last year, we are presenting 5 different models for consideration with a range of fees for each cart size, as was done with the fees during the initial sanitation modernization implementation of 2017. This is good. As has been the case across the world, across sectors, and across the board for us, costs have been steadily rising since the inception of the sanitation modernization rollout. As you can see in this slide, we've experienced increased fees for recycling, processing, and solid waste disposal each of the years since 2017. Overall, it's about a $205,000 difference between 2017 and 2022 on those disposal and processing costs. While 2022 did see some reductions in overall tonnage of trash and recycling from 2021, the cost increases in all other categories rose at a higher pace from 2021 to 2022. Next slide. As you can see here, I think I have my slides out of order, sorry. So as you can see here, solid waste and recycling tonnages over time from 2018 to 2022. 2022 did see some reductions from 2021 in both solid waste and recycling tonnages. There's some theories behind why these reductions have occurred from 2022 to 2021. For recycling, that's a big drop-off, almost 1,000 tons of recycling less. We've been working very closely with our service provider, Republic Services, and trying to figure out what this is from. First off, it's because we're recycling better in Bloomington. When we rolled out the 2017 program with the single-stream recycling, those first 2 years of tonnages for recycling had higher levels of contamination than we're currently seeing. We also have had some products that are no longer acceptable. So the greasy pizza box that used to go into the recycling is no longer recyclable. So those are being pulled out as part of tonnages. The cellophane and the plastic bags are pulled out. So these reductions in tonnages on the recycling side are somewhat what we expected. For the solid waste side, we're theorizing this is kind of the return to work. You can see in 18 we were only at 6,700 tons for solid waste. And the increases in 19, 20, big increase with COVID, 22, 21, another big increase. We attributed that to a lot of the folks being at home. So instead of being in the office and putting your lunch in the trash at work, you're at home putting your trash in your home residential trash. So, but what these tonnages show us is that we've had increases over time, and we're starting to hopefully level back out a bit. But the next slide is going to show you the cost increases we've occurred with these tonnages. So, we're back to about the 2018 levels, a little bit below, but we had huge increases in 2020 and 2021. Same for recycling. So 2018 until 2019, we never paid to have our recycling processed. Worldwide markets changed, and you can see again here significant increases in costs that we've just had to absorb within the rate structure we currently have. Next slide. But the bigger issue for us right now, we've been able to absorb the cost increases on disposal and processing. Where we're seeing the biggest uptick is in our supply costs. So supplies across the board, whether it's just the general supplies the crews use to, the gloves, the glasses, the different things that the crews are using as part of their their supplies to do collection. Fuel cost increases have been a tremendous increase over the last couple years. Vehicle maintenance cost. We knew we were going to have higher vehicle maintenance costs with the new program. We knew the trucks were more complex. We knew they had more systems on it that would need more regular maintenance. But what we've also seen is, from what we predicted early on with the modernization program to what we're actually seeing in the cost of parts and supplies for the trucks in the market, is that the inflationary costs of that are really impacting us. And then, as well as the increased utility costs for sanitation as well. So the next slide is going to show a table with where you can see some of these changes. So fuel in 2017, we're about 3 times higher now in 2022 on those costs. Motor vehicle repair, more than double. Utilities and other operational expenses, more than double than what we were in 2017. So these are costs that are beyond our control. We can't control the fuel prices. We can't control the utility prices. We can't control the price of the parts to fix the trucks. That's a big part of it. Overall, you can see it's about a $340,000 difference on the annual from 2017 to 2022. What's the impact of these increased costs? And this is the place we don't want to get in, and this is why we're here tonight. By not keeping up with the needed investments in capital asset replacements for the trucks, whereas we had hoped to purchase 1 truck per year as a replacement cycle, we're currently purchasing 1 truck every 2 years. This is not a good position to be in. Given the heavy-duty use of the trucks, these are usually on a 7-year replacement cycle. We're definitely on a 10 to 12-year replacement cycle right now, and over the last couple years. Moving on to what some of the successes of the sanitation modernization program have been. Overall, and I can tell you this from what I hear in the grocery store when I'm stopped, overall resident satisfaction, next slide, Stephen, sorry. Resident satisfaction with garbage collection has increased, as shown in the results of the community surveys from 2017 to 2021. In 2017, it was an overall satisfaction rate of 78%. 2019, 84%, and 2021, 83%. So we're seeing that residents do appreciate the new system in the community survey. Additionally, our diversion rates have gone up. In 2017, we were at about a 32% diversion rate. 2022, we're at a 35% diversion rate. And again, diversion rates are the amount of material that are diverted from the landfill through your recycling program, through your yard waste program, and through your scrap metal appliance program. The national average, the most recent national averages we can find show that it was 32% in 2018 nationally, and the Indiana rate in 2019 was only 19%. So Bloomington's a good recycling community, and as I mentioned earlier, since the inception of the single stream, we've had better success in getting cleaner recycling to the material recovery facility. Next slide. While sanitation work continues to be a profession that ranks as one of the top 10 most dangerous work environments for many different reasons, we've been fortunate to have reduced the number of serious workforce injuries at sanitation since the inception of the modernization program. The next slide is going to show you some numbers on this as well, but to me, this is the most important success factor we've had here. For any of the members that were on the council in 2017, one of the biggest reasons we moved to that modernized program was employee wellness and safety. We were having huge rates of serious injury and non-serious injury from that type of old school program where you were heaving the trash in the back of the truck. We had a lot of lifting injuries, a lot of back injuries, a lot of strains, some very significant. While about 50% of the households are still serviced by the rear load trucks, about 50% are serviced by the automated side load pickup as well. But additionally, with the rear loads, even though about half the households are still picked up by rear load, the tipping mechanisms on the back of the trucks have eliminated that lifting and throwing, and has reduced a lot of those injuries as well. However, it doesn't mitigate 100% of the risk of this line of work. Staff are still prone to the occasional knee or ankle sprains as they're getting on and off a truck, or a strain from moving a really heavy 96-gallon cart. Those still occur, but next slide. Oh, shoot. Actually, can you go back one? I had a table that I thought was in here, and I'll share with you. But back before I think it was 2015, we had a $170,000 a year for worker compensation costs. Since then, we're less than $15,000 in most years on any worker compensation costs since modernization. That's a huge, huge improvement and success for the workforce down there. So, moving on to the proposal for adjusting the service fees. Again, we've talked about the rising costs of processing, of disposal, of supplies, and overall operational costs. When we were working on this ordinance update and working with Council Attorney Lucas, we were originally just going to put the proposal out there as here are the 5 options and have a deliberation with the council on that. In order to produce an ordinance, we needed to come up with a proposal. So we after hearing from some council members in the last budget hearings, we put forward a rate proposal that is in a 50% general fund reduction range. So next chart. As you see in this chart, the annual amounts of general fund support that go to the sanitation division. So this is the amount that is, this is the amount of general fund support that goes to sanitation to offset the revenues that don't meet the overall cost of service and the entire budget for the sanitation division. It ranges, from about $900,000 to the $1.1 million annually. Next slide. So, the proposal to adjust service fees. As you see in this chart, you can see the current rates today, $6.51 for a 35-gallon, $11.61 for a 64, and $18.52 for a 96-gallon cart. The models below it, so the no general fund support reduction, that is just to meet the rising costs that we've incurred. We need to adjust rates just to meet the cost increases that we've been seeing over the last several years. So the no general fund support reduction is just that. It raises the rates to meet the rising costs and continues with that about $1 million annual average on general fund support. The next 4 models, the 25% support reduction, 50% support reduction, and 100% reduction, are the models that would reduce the general fund support by those percentages. The rate structures are based on cart sizes for the solid waste cart, but it also includes the cost of providing the recycling services. It includes the cost of providing yard waste services. It includes the costs for all the services provided down at sanitation. We used to refer to recycling as being free. Recycling is not free. We've got the crews, 4 crews per day that are picking up recycling, and then we have all those recycling processing costs on top of it at this point. You see the set of ranges. For those council members that were on the council in 2017 when we first moved to this rate structure, we asked for a range for each of the cart sizes for the Board of Public Works to be able to set the final rate within the ranges. That helped us in year 3 of the program adjust rates based on the cost increases we had seen in the first 2 years. We're again asking for that so that over the next several years we would have some flexibility if we see market conditions continue to increase costs. I'll also note that these rate structures, we did a lot of peer community research. So what are peer communities of like Bloomington, charging for trash and recycle services. These are very much, even at the 100% support reduction, we're still in a line with a lot of our peer communities, and I can give some specific examples of that if you'd like later. And it also, these rate structures also are very competitive and even lower than most of the private haulers that offer sanitation services in Bloomington. The next slide. Additionally, beyond those rate structure proposal models, we are asking to update. We offer an additional weekly pickup. So one of the things we heard when we went to the modernized program is, what if I have a heavy trash week and my cart wasn't enough for that week? We'll do an additional pickup on Fridays, and you see the current rates and then the proposed rates based on the increases of the rates that we've been proposing. We also are asking for an update for the large item and appliance collections. Right now, it was just a $10 flat fee. Back in 2017, when we ran those numbers, it cost us about $10 to pick up a couch. We're much higher than that at this point. So we're proposing a $25 large item pickup and a $35 appliance pickup. It's a lot of information, and I know that you folks are going to have a lot of questions. I've got a ton of backup information here on the data that we've collected over the last several years, and happy to just answer questions. If there's anything I'm not able to answer tonight, we'll certainly get those answers and get those back to you very quickly. So I appreciate your consideration of this. I know in my individual conversations with council members over the last year, some folks were very interested in reducing the general fund support, and I heard from others that were not interested in reducing the general fund support. That's why we created these ranges, why we created these models, to give the council an opportunity to deliberate on the fee structure based on the council's will. So, again, happy to answer any questions, and I know these rate increases are going to be taken seriously, and we're here to try to provide the best information we can.
Thank you, Mr. Wason, for the presentation. We'll now go to questions from members. I'll start with Councilmember Sims, followed by Councilmember Rallo.
Thank you. Two questions to begin with. The general fund subsidy, I guess for lack of a better term, how much were those the numbers that you put up there?
Yes.
So that's how much more than what the constituents are already
Yes.
paying you?
Yeah, so when we talk about the amount of general fund support or subsidy, it's the total cost to operate the sanitation division minus the revenues brought in from the residents, and then and it ranges, over the last 5 years, it's ranged between the low end of 900,000 to the high end of about 1.1 million. Back in 2017 or 16, it was about 1.4 million. So we've seen some higher numbers than that 1.1, but we've been able to keep it right around that $1 million range.
Got you. During your time in leadership, has there ever been a time when market costs reduced?
No.
Well, okay, no, that's good enough.
No.
But if they were, would you refund money or go back and come to us to reduce the cost to our citizens?
Absolutely. Let me give you an example. So we enter into usually a 3-year contract with solid waste disposal and recycling processing. Currently, those are both held with Republic Services. If the rate, so can you back up to the slide that showed the a couple more. Oh yeah, here we go. So you see the $43.87 per ton for solid waste disposal and the $27.19 per ton for the recycling process. Our contract with Republic Services ends in the end at the end of this year. Over the next couple months, we're going to be putting out an RFI or RFP, more like an RFP to any providers of solid waste disposal and recycling processing to say, what's your per ton rate? And so, for example, if we got one of the local service providers for these services that came in at $38 a ton for trash and $19 for recycle, we would certainly be looking at these rates again. But I'm not getting any indications from anyone in the industry that those rates are going to go down per ton. My guess is that they're going to continue to rise. The other thing with these per ton rates is within the contract, there's annual CPI increases that are built into the contract. So last year, we were 3% less on each of those. The year before, we were 3% less than that year. So they've had annual increases put into them as well.
Thank you. Last question, if you may. Last year, this council increased local income tax as revenue for this city to the tune of, I don't know, 16 million, I think, 17 million. And I consider that to be part of city services and revenue for that. And I'm glad that what you get in the grocery store is a satisfaction rate. I'm glad you get that. That's not what I get. In fact, the questions I'm going to get is, when do I pay for the police to come? When do I pay for snow to be removed? Because I'm already paying taxes. This isn't personal. This is you and I. I mean, it's business. I got a lot of respect for you. But this is the reality and other costs. So we'll talk about all that later once we get into regular session, that sort of thing. But and you said some council members wanted that and wanted I think you know I wasn't one of them. So thank you.
Very well aware of that one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sims. Councilmember Vallo.
Let's begin on this slide because you need to convince me. So this is the disposal and recycling processing costs.
Yep.
What I see is that that there's a surge in the pandemic years for recycling, and then it returns back to
Yep.
its former
Yep.
place. So, but you're claiming that costs are up.
These, and they've increased, yes, they increased over the years, certainly increased over the years. We did see that 2022 reduction, but like I said earlier, these were higher than we were expecting for budgets, and then where the real cost increase has been on the supply side. That's been the $340,000 annual difference of 2017 to 2022. This, if it keeps up, we'll be able to stay on the lower ends of the ranges, but I'm not also convinced that that may be a little bit of an anomaly. We'll see.
Okay, regarding reduced tonnages that you experienced, you break it down percent glass, plastic, paper, I assume.
With the single stream right now, no. So we don't have an annual report on what is cardboard, glass, plastic.
So
It's
it could
single stream.
reflect less glass.
What's that?
It could reflect less glass. Glass
could
is
possibly.
really heavy, and if you're using plastic, it's a tiny percent.
Again, so from 2021 to 2022, we no longer, so that's when we got the ultimatum from the recycling processor. You've got to get the pizza boxes out. Your cardboard's not of high enough quality. I think a lot of that tonnage reduction was that cardboard, because if you'll ever see as you drive through the neighborhoods after a recycle route, if there's a cardboard pizza box between the lid and the cart for the recycle, it's because the recycle guys have pulled it back out and left it. Because,
Well, it seems like we could find out. It seems like we could do some kind of sampling, some sort of randomized sampling. I mean, I know picking through recycling and just saying, okay, how much is glass, how much is...
Oh, sure. And
right?
those studies have been done. We haven't done one in the last couple of years.
Okay,
But,
might be good information.
Sure.
I have some more, but I can wait if others...
Let's do some more first-round questions. Councilmember Sandberg.
Yes, I am certainly not one who is for eliminating the contributions from the general fund. This is a public service. Sanitation is a public service. I would hate to see it go privatized for a lot of reasons. My question has to do about other ways we can reduce costs without putting the burden on fees for the consumers, for the our constituents. As you know, I talk to the workforce, and I learn a lot when I talk to the workforce. And I had some concerns about our personnel and our fleet. We have very few people working on all of the rolling stock, including these big trucks and the more modernization trucks. So can we talk a little bit about internal? How are we doing with our staffing levels and our fleet maintenance personnel? Because I was understanding that they were so short-staffed that many things were having to be outsourced, like oil changes, because they just couldn't get to it. So could you talk a little bit about what's going on internally within our own operations? And are there things we can do to tighten our own belts and to, effect more efficiencies from an internal before we start putting more fees onto our customers?
So a couple of things. First, I'll start with the cost, and then I'll go back to the staffing with things like fleet and sanitation. With those supply costs, we don't have any control over those. We don't have any control over what fuel costs, and those routes are fixed. We're going to use the same amount of fuel week in, week out, and I think it was on fuel alone, we were 3 times the cost from 2017 to 2022. So, that's not an area for belt tightening. The costs of the parts to fix the truck, those have just continued to fix the trucks. Those have just continued to rise outside of our control. So a lot of those areas, we don't have belt tightening ability. When it comes to now staffing and things like fleet maintenance and outsourcing, we did have a period over the last 9 months to a year where we were down at times up to 3 mechanics at fleet maintenance, whether it was turnover, FMLA, or other absences. We are back to fully staffed. We have a new fleet maintenance manager, Corey Snyder. While I wouldn't begin to say that we are staffed at the levels I would like to see for fleet maintenance, we're in a much better place than we were 9 to 12 months ago. We've reduced the backlog on preventative maintenance significantly, and where the outsourcing that we have continued to do are for the larger engine rebuilds, or the things that are going to take multiple weeks, where you're going to have a vehicle in a bay taking up the bay space for multiple weeks. So those really big, heavy repairs, those tend to be outsourced. When we were down 2 and 3 mechanics, we did start to outsource some of the preventative oil changes to Ford and to others. We've reined that back in. For sanitation in particular, though, we just had a really good conversation with union leadership from sanitation, union leadership from fleet maintenance, and as well as the management team for both fleet, sanitation, and myself as the public works director, discussing how we can make improvements there. We are going to consider an outsourced fleet maintenance service for the short term to try to help keep after these trucks, to give a little bit of alleviation to the fleet maintenance division. But it's no secret, and I've mentioned it in my budget hearings in the past, we're below American Public Works Association standards for the number of mechanics, for the number of vehicles and equipment we have. The last budget cycle, we added a mechanic for the first time. That was a huge benefit to us, and something that I'm very thankful for, and I know the rest of the staff at Fleet are very thankful for. So when it comes to belt tightening, I promise you, I think some of you have heard me talk about the mantra of Public Works. The very first statement in the mantra for Public Works is that we're going to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. And we talk about that, I wouldn't say religiously, but very regularly in all of our meetings. And I try to make sure we're abiding by that at all times. If we're not doing that, we're not doing our jobs. And one of the things with the staffing levels at sanitation when we presented the modernization program is we thought it would take less people to do the pickup routes. We've reduced about 2 FTEs at sanitation since 2017, but we've also realized there's a higher volume of customer service needs when we own the carts. So we've had some more back office needs that we've been filling gaps with folks on light duty or different things, but we have reduced 2 FTEs since the inception of the modernization program. So good belt tightening there.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. And I'm well aware that the hard costs are there, the fuel costs, nothing can be done. And this equipment is expensive. But one of the things you do here when you talk to the rank and file and you talk to the boots on the ground workers is that preventative maintenance does go a long way in the longevity of the equipment and making sure that we have enough staff and enough wherewithal to make sure that we are preserving what we have and not passing those costs then, on to the public. So.
I'm confident that we're not having tremendous increased cost on the maintenance and repair because we're not doing preventative maintenance. We're having increased costs because these are the heaviest duty, most wear and tear trucks we have out there. These are big, heavy trucks that, if it were up to me, there would be no cul-de-sacs in Bloomington, because every time they get into a cul-de-sac, they're putting wear and tear on the edges of those tires, they're putting wear and tear on the chassis, they're putting wear and tear on the suspension systems, and that's the type of heavy-duty use that increases the cost of maintenance on a regular basis.
Thank you. Further first-round questions, Councilmember Smith.
Ms. Wason, I always appreciate all your information and totally believe you in, with all those costs and everything. Where I keep getting stuck, and I know we've had this discussion before, I keep getting stuck is I just don't understand why we need to eliminate the subsidy from the general fund. And in fact, if I understand it right, we're going to eliminate the leaf vacuuming program, which is going to save somewhere about $900,000, right?
Not quite, but
Well,
it's a totally
well-
different budget too, though.
Well, we have the ability, and we have general fund to subsidize it, and that's why people pay taxes, and that's why we did a local income tax increase and added 16 more million to the city's coffers. I just can't get beyond that. That's where I'm at. I don't dispute the cost increases or anything. It seems to me like it's essential services, and we just have the ability to not increase that fee at this point. Down the road, maybe we do, but it seems like there's enough money around in the city to pay for this. So that's where I'm stuck. I mean, why do we need to eliminate the general fund subsidy?
As you can see, there's 5 models being proposed. It's really a policy decision of the council. We heard from some council members they were interested in it. We heard from others that they weren't interested in reducing it. That's why you've been presented 5 models, and as the legislative body, we're kind of leaving it up to you to discuss, deliberate, and make the decision here. As far as if the lit money should be used to offset these increased costs, even with the no general fund support reduction, I'm up here today because my boss doesn't think that's the way he wants to go with this. As the Public Works Director, my big concern is the operations. The philosophical policy decisions way up here about, how should the money be divvied up amongst the departments and amongst the services we provide, that goes the pay grade above me. I'm at a pretty high pay grade here at the city, but there's, that's really the mayor's office and the controller's office making those informing those decisions. To me, it doesn't matter. I need to cover the cost of the operation,
Sure.
whether it's with 100% general fund support reduction or 0 general fund support reduction. That's exactly why we've proposed the models as we have, so there could be deliberation and a decision of the council.
Yeah, and I appreciate your position. I still just can't get beyond it.
Okay.
So I do appreciate you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Further first-round questions? Councilmember Flaherty.
First, a question about the kind of small ranges that are in the current rates, as well as the proposed different versions of rate structures. It seems like costs for personnel and everything else just rise over time. You mentioned the 3% increase that we're seeing annually now for the haulers. In addition, so these ranges, it seemed to last us about 5 years this last cycle. Would it not also make sense to simply automatically increase the range allowed by a very small percentage each year to just keep pace with rising costs as like a matter of course, like we do with other things like parking rates?
I'm not opposed to that. That definitely could be built in. We know whether it's the personnel cost increases of the union contract annually that are going to raise the costs of sanitation. We know that there's going to be, it's likely that, supply costs from what we're seeing, inflation is not going to let up too much in the near future. So it certainly could be built in, and that's exactly why we propose the range, is so that if there is a big cost increase in a given year, we can ask the board within these ranges to adjust the rates.
Okay. I have some more, if that's okay. Okay. How many households are served by city sanitation services?
The current count is just over 13,500, and it May and August, there's not big variations, but several hundred household variations, but it averages right around the 13,500. When we did the initial 2017 study, we thought it was closer to 15,000 when we looked at the hand data and the other data we had at the time, but we currently have about the 13,500 active accounts.
Okay, and do you know how many households are not served by city sanitation services?
I do not have that number, no.
Is that a number we could get, do you think?
I wouldn't see why. I'd have to talk with some other staff at the city. I know. Could you kind of so how many households aren't served? Well, it's more about what types of other residential. So we serve units of 4 or less, single-family units of 4 or less. So it could be a household with 4 individual units, one address with 4 individual units. And so that's what our threshold is. We do no commercial service, so we don't pick up from restaurants, nonprofits, corporate, industrial. That's not in our area of service. We also don't pick up from the multifamily of 4 or more units. So what we're probably able to get is the number of addresses we don't serve, but not exactly like a number of households we don't serve. I'm sure we could then dig in, how many apartments are at this location, how many apartments are at that location. But I think I'd have to work with a couple other city departments to really hone in on that number. And we can try to do that in the next couple weeks.
Okay, a few more follow-ups if that's all right. So everyone in the city has to have sanitation service of some kind, though, is that right?
Everyone in the city has to have sanitation services of some kind. I'm trying to think of any instances where that wouldn't be true. I'm thinking of the last
all
time
residential.
Yeah, any resident.
properties.
Yes, of some sort. Yeah, I think the answer is yes there, but I also I can think back of some of the comments we got back in 2017 of, I've taken my trash to work for 25 years and I've never had to pay for it, so whether or not they actually have somebody pick it up from their house or they take it somewhere else or whatnot, that could be factored in.
Okay, so we have a group of 1 residents getting sanitation services from the city, and another group of residents who are not getting sanitation services from the city and therefore paying for their own services. Have we looked at the demographics of those 2 groups at all?
No.
Okay. Sort of going a different direction, what would it take to provide city sanitation services to all residents and not just some?
Oof.
Logistically, financially, otherwise?
Honestly, not something I've really mulled over in terms of, so first off, we would need, if we took on trash, solid waste and recycling services for all apartment complexes, so we would have to, oh gosh, that's a huge one, Matt. I've honestly not put a lot of thought into that because we've always been limited by code to serve 4 or less. But now we're thinking about different types of trucks that can pick up dumpsters instead of just trash carts. There would be a whole heck of a lot of analysis that would need to go into that, and quite honestly, have not done that based on our code and how it's written.
Okay, that's all for now. Thanks.
Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Hi, Mr. Wason. Thank you for your presentation.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate those tables. I had some questions following along Councilmember Flaherty's questions just about household pickups, but I think it would be, this is committee of the whole, right? So something I do want to see at regular session next week is more numbers around who do we not provide trash for? Because our city is 84,000 people, and the 13,500 households are going to be a minority. It is a minority of the trash that gets created in Bloomington. Most trash comes from commercial and multifamily. So just when I've talked about composting programs in the past, the sliver that it would reduce composting if we're only collecting from single family up to fourplexes is very small, as opposed to if we did citywide composting. So it's just most of our trash doesn't come from these households that we service. If trash is a public good, as some of our council members say, should we be providing this to all city residents? instead of only up to fourplexes, because most of our folks live in multifamily. So like, is that something we should look at? Do you think, I know you said you haven't really mulled it over, but like, should we take a look at that as a council, just in terms of equity, so that the people who are paying into the general fund are also getting that service?
I think that is a very big policy decision for the council to make, and I wouldn't provide an opinion on that tonight.
Okay. Okay, but you will for next week. I mean, households, I think, is like a census data. It's a piece of, it's a, right? We can look up number of
It's
households.
well, I'm not, honestly, I'm not
Right.
familiar enough to answer that on
Okay.
how we would come up with the total number of units, or, I know it's going to be possible
Mm-hmm.
to come up with a number of units that are in the apartments in Bloomington. Whether I'll have that by next Wednesday, I don't know.
Okay. And then just another question that is a little different, though. Fuel costs are really high. Have we considered moving trash collection to every other week?
Not under this proposal, no.
Is that something that you think would be useful for the city?
Honestly, based on what we see in the field week in and week out, no, I don't think our residents would want every other week service.
Okay, I was just trying to like find different ways to reduce costs or help here, but it sounds like we're kind of in a pickle.
Yeah, I would say no, we haven't considered reducing service levels to biweekly for either trash or recycling. What we see in the field is that folks are using it week in, week out. Recycle containers are often very full. Solid waste containers are often very full week in, week out.
Okay, thank you.
I'll let you take a crack here.
Sure.
First question, how many mechanics does Fleet employ in theory, and how many are actually staffing the positions? In other words, how many line items are we paying for, or we have in the budget, and how many short are we?
I guess I don't know. We have nine FTE mechanics as part of our salary ordinances.
And
But-
you have 9 employed?
Yes, we're currently
you're fully staffed?
We're fully staffed at this time, yes. Over the last year, at times, we were down up to 3 mechanics, but right now, we are fully staffed, and that is a very good thing.
Second thing is, do you have any internal documents that have researched what the market is currently bearing for residential trash service to a single-family home?
So what are some of the private haulers charging?
Correct.
Yes, I do have that here. I won't say which companies charge what, but I do have 2 examples. Let me find
I mean, you
those.
could, I'd like to see that data anonymized, averaged, either way, I'd like to see that
Yep,
data.
hang on one second. All right, so one of them, for trash pickup, weekly trash pickup and biweekly recycle is $36.05 per month. That's one of the private haulers. And that, again, recycling every other week and trash on the weekly. That's at $36 per month. And where did the other one go? I had 2 of them. The other one was, hang on. I can't seem to find the other one right now, but it was also higher than what we've proposed in all rate structures except the 100% support reduction.
Do they make a distinction on cart sizes?
One
or-
of them did, one of them did not. The $36.05 a month was just a standard, I think it was a 64-gallon for trash and a 96 for recycle.
Can we get some version of that data in a chart that we can to look at without, I mean, maybe we can average it?
Yep.
Maybe we can get a third company so that we can have a better across-the-board idea.
Yep.
Also, according to data I have from hand, let me pull it up here. In 2022, there were 11,784 owner-occupied single-family units in the city, 4,208 rental single-family units, total of almost 16,000 units. In addition, there were 2,792 duplex, triplex, 4, 6-plex, and condo units. So I don't know how that breaks down, but I do know that there's at least 2,500 maybe 3,000 or 4,000 more units than accounts that we have.
So, and I think
Yeah.
part of the explanation there is some of the units that have 4 only want 1 trash can and 1 recycle cart for all. So, I can't remember what they
That
call it.
doesn't really explain the there's 16,000 single-family units in the city, only 4,200 of which are rental. I would think that all of them would be getting trash service, and we only have 13,500 accounts.
Well, we can dig into that, I'm certain, but with units of 4 or less, a lot of the 4-unit single-family residences have A, B, C, D as, it's 300 South Smith, unit A, B, C, and D. We worked with landlords and property owners when we did the rollout to say, what do you need? We didn't force them to take 4 sets of trash carts for somewhere they only wanted 1 set. So I think that's going to be some of the discrepancy there, but we can dig into that data as well.
Well, again, that only addresses we
I
have
understand.
2,792 duplex, triplex, 4, 6plex, et cetera. So that explains them, but there's still more single-family units than there are accounts. So yeah, I'd like to see you dig into that. I've got another one, but I can hold it. Let's go to a second round of questions. Mr. Lucas.
I'll just note, Councilmember Piedmont Smith is on the Zoom meeting. She's unable to enable video. She does have questions.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith, welcome. Please go ahead and ask your question. Questions. Is she able to unmute?
Yeah.
I'm hearing
Thank you.
something. Can you speak up a little bit? Councilmember Piedmont Smith, are you there? You're barely audible. Can you say something again,
I am.
please?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Welcome. Please go ahead with your
Thank you.
questions.
Greetings from the Andes Mountains. In Peru. My question is about the subsidy from the general fund. Do people who pay taxpayer dollars that end up in our general fund, do all of those people receive sanitation services?
I think the answer is no. I think we've established that.
Okay, and is there an opportunity cost of that $900,000 or so that comes from the general fund to subsidize sanitation? Is there an opportunity cost of removing that from the general fund?
Well, yes, I believe so.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith, I think we've lost. Are you there? Have we lost Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
She appears to still be unmuted.
Did you hear enough of the question to be able to answer it, Mr. Wason?
She asked if there was an opportunity cost for that $900,000 if it was not used for sanitation. I think the answer is, of course, yes, you could use it for other purposes.
Okay. While she tries to reconnect, I think we're going to come back to a second round of questions, and hopefully she'll be able to be heard. Let's now go back to second round. I see Councilmember Rallo, then Councilmember Flaherty.
Okay, so going back to so the council passed the ED lit, which is 14.5 million, I think, approximately. And there was a breakdown in terms of where that money was targeted. Some of it was for essential city services. Is there an opportunity to utilize some of those funds in terms of essential city services? Or just out of the ED lid in general, climate action was one bucket, and clearly solid waste is a component of our climate impact, right? So for instance, 40% of our waste is compostable. So Councilmember Rosenberger was talking about composting. Are we doing, could we utilize money from there to offset, to try to pay either for programs that would reduce not only the volume, really the cost is the weight, right, of the solid waste that we're paying for. In any case, have we explored utilizing the ED-Lit?
No, we're proposing, no. The
Okay.
short answer is no. I mean, when I discussed this with the mayor's office and the controller's office, this is the proposal that was brought forward. It wasn't thought to use the ED-Lit for this service.
Okay. Well, I think perhaps we should explore that. Getting back to this idea, so you want to raise rates on the volume, but the cost is really accrued is the weight. So we have this sort of dilemma, right? That you're saying there's a correlation between the volume and the weight, and to some degree that's true. But you could have people who are putting a lot of food waste, for instance, in the solid waste stream, which is we should disincentivize. And I'm trying to think about how to do that. Now, it's a difficult thing to get to, but it seems to me that we can incentivize composting. And we're doing that to some degree.
Sure.
Of course. But I think that we should maybe double our effort, because as somebody said, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And I think that unless we have the incentive in place, we're probably going to continue getting, at least as much weight. And that's really the key. So it's sort of a comment, I recognize, but what do you think about that proposition?
To
reduce the weight.
I guess I don't know
Are we
what
doing
the
enough to
question
reduce?
was.
Are we doing enough to reduce the weight? Because it seems to me we're just saying, well, look, we've got this. Costs are going up, so what are we going to do? Well, we're going to raise rates, but are we doing enough to reduce the cost? That is the weight of the volume.
Beyond promotion and messaging of how important composting is, we're certainly doing that through the Recollect system, which is an online system that we get messaging out to users of the system. But beyond that, it's whether or not the incentive through this program is in the cart sizes. So the smaller the cart size you have, the less waste you produce and the less you pay per gallon. So that's been the incentive program to try to reduce the volumes and the volume and weight of the trash, the solid waste we collect. Would curbside composting reduce the amount of food waste that goes into the waste stream? 100%, yeah, absolutely. There's a cost to that. That's a whole nother crew. That's a whole nother route every day. That's
Well, or else you could have on-site compost.
Absolutely, the best way to compost is right on site.
We could distribute, something that composters that are
absolutely, and we've partnered on those in the past with the Solid Waste Management District, with the Commission on Sustainability. Certainly, we've partnered on those types of efforts where the earth machines are discounted for people to use. I'm a huge proponent of on-site composting. That is the best way to compost, is for your food waste and your yard waste never to leave your house or your household. And so with our reduction of the leafing services, that's a huge component of that, is trying to encourage that on-site composting. That's the best place to compost.
Mr. Rowland, would you yield for a question, clarifying question?
Yeah, sure.
Are you suggesting that by composting or otherwise reducing organic material, that the average weight of one of the bins would be lighter? Is that the idea?
Absolutely, it would be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so compost is heavy, in other words.
Yes.
Thank you.
And it's a goal strategy within our climate action plan to do exactly that, because of increase organics diversion by 40% of 2018 values.
Right, but The reason for that was to reduce methane and the like. This is a new idea that it also is heavy and it might take less gas to move around. So that's just what I'm trying to clarify.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. And may I ask one
Yes,
follow-up?
please go ahead.
Okay, the other, I mean, these are sort of meta questions, larger scale questions, but it seems to me that, you know, this is a recurring problem, and I think it's, one strategy is to have our local landfill reopen. And that's something that I don't think we've had enough discussion about, because we're continually beholden to Republic. The costs are going to go up, there's no question. Diesel fuel is going to go up because all the oil we're producing is light, tight oil. Diesel oil is more than twice as expensive as it was in 2017. So it seems to me just by raising rates, it's not, you know, we're just sort of kicking the can down the road. How do you feel about that? About exploring reopening the landfill? Are you doing that, or is that discussion happening in the administration? Or?
No, the city has never managed the landfill. That's always been an operation of the Monroe County Solid Waste Management
Yes.
District. It's a county function. We have never, so no, the city's
That's where
not
we took our
exploring.
waste, though. I mean, so,
Let's move on. Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you. So we have in this proposal different levels of reduction in the general fund subsidy for the folks who receive city sanitation services. Has the administration considered phasing out that subsidy gradually over time instead of these chunks all at once? I mean, even if we land on any one of these proposals, it sort of satisfies or dissatisfies, you know, a council member or a set of council members, depending on what their priorities are in this respect. But it doesn't do anything to sort of structurally address the issue. Like, is that something y'all have looked at or thought about?
I think the the models in the proposal would certainly be able to allow for that to occur. I think you could look at it from the perspective of if in year one we did a 25% reduction, in year two if we started at the 50% reduction rate model. In subsequent to years 2 and 3, you could move to 75 and the 100% reduction model. I think that's that's part of the whole reason we provided the models as we did, to allow for consideration of the council. And yes, it could be phased at that point if you wanted. If it was the priority of a majority of the council in year 3 to reduce the support 100%, you could start at 50, 75, and go to the 100, so certainly.
Okay, so I mean, as structured though, it's fixed. I guess I'm contrasting this with, I believe it was Ordinance 1811 that set new parking rates and set a schedule, a 10-year or 15-year schedule, to try to reduce how heavily we were subsidizing that over time because of the opportunity cost of using lots of general fund dollars, for instance, on things that are traditionally fee for service. And it seems to me like that's maybe a more prudent approach here, so that there's not sort of price shock, but a gradual alignment that's closer to peer cities or private haulers, since we have over half of residents also paying private hauler rates who aren't getting subsidy, but are in fact paying for that subsidy for others. So I mean, like, would you be friendly to an amendment to change the rate structure to phase out the subsidy over time?
I'm friendly to whatever amendment is going to put forward the proposal that the council wants to vote on. So the structures are there to allow it to happen.
If I could follow up, I'm trying to understand too, like, why this amount of general fund subsidy. Like, we could also increase it. You could pay $5 million out of the general fund for sanitation services and eliminate fees altogether. I mean, if the idea is that no one should pay for sanitation because tax dollars pay for that, like, I would say we'd still have an equity problem because we serve some residents and not others, just like we do now, and that's why it's an equity problem now. But I don't understand. Do you have any insight into why $1 million is the level of that we've decided to pull out of the general fund to spend on this, as opposed to having rates cover costs like we do with City of Bloomington utilities or things like other utilities?
I think you can see the historical. It's been around that $1 million amount because of the historical nature of it. That's what the That historically, that's what's been budgeted, and we've continued that year over year. So it's not a pull it out of a hat number. It's just that's where, when we came into the sanitation modernization era of 2017, in previous years, we're always at about that $1 million level. That's what we used as basis for that original model of rate structures, and that's what we've continued. So in plenty of the council budget hearings since in subsequent years, it's been a conversation of how much should we be using general fund support for sanitation services. So yeah, it's been a historical number, and that's why it's kind of remained at that level.
One last question, which is, have you considered general fund subsidies for folks who don't get city sanitation services? Like, we could take $1 million from the general fund and distribute it to folks who are paying for their own sanitation services.
I've not been thinking about that, no.
Would you support it?
Would I support it? I think I'd need to speak with others of the administration and the mayor's office before I could answer that. But again, I think, and I hate to keep doing it, but these are kind of policy level decisions of the council. And, you know, we could have an opinion on if we would support it or not, but in the end, it comes down to what the council wants to move forward with.
Well, okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Councilmember Sims.
I just have one question. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Would it be your preference, or would you support it, or do you think administration would support? And ultimately, do you think it would be a worthy goal for the city to be out of the subsidizing, paying anything, and all those costs came to us, users? That seems like an ultimate, does that make sense?
No, can you restate? So, no, I don't understand what you're trying to.
Well, we're already paying we're paying a part of this already.
Sure.
That's the sole revenue?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the subsidy that we're talking about makes up the difference of your costs?
Yeah.
So is it anyone's preference that maybe with the structure, if we raise it up like 50% more,
Mm-hmm.
is that going to take everything, is different models? So it'll take out certain parts of the general fund, but put those costs squarely on us as tax-paying citizens, if that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense. Oh, I'm not talking, I know it don't make sense to you. Nothing makes sense to you.
No,
I withdraw the question. That's okay. I'll think about it and I'll get back to you.
yeah, well, let's connect on that one, because
I just want to know where we're going, because fuel costs are not going to go down. Sure. All these other things, I mean, I agree with some of my colleagues. There has to be something else if we're going to do this. And if I knew that I was going to, well, okay.
We do have a period of debate here. It's coming up, so like if we.
Well, I can do like everybody else and.
Of course you can. I just
and
poor Mr. Wason
and then form
here.
it into a question.
Slings and
I
arrows.
could do that. No, I could form it into a question like my colleagues.
Please do.
No, I said I withdraw.
All right, then.
Okay.
Further questions? Councilmember Smith.
In a discussion in another group one time, we talked about the burden that it may put on people with fixed incomes and that. Is there any way in the model it could be structured so that those folks that are below a certain level of income would not be charged the increases or get it for free?
That exists today. We do have a program that we partner with the South Central Community Action Program with on assisting low-income residents with vouchers for their trash service. So that does exist. We coordinate that through the utility department because I believe it also can apply to the water or sewer bill as well.
Right.
But yeah, so we have a program where folks can work with CAP to receive that benefit.
Do people take advantage of that?
I'd have to pull the most recent numbers, but yes, I haven't pulled them for 2022, but in previous years, absolutely. I think we exhaust the entire amount that they budget for it. I'll double check though.
Okay, thank you. I'm, that's part of my overall struggle with not subsidizing it with the general fund, and then if there's individuals that may be burdened by that, if there's any way we can figure out. If I remember right, the program was exhausted in certain of these areas with utilities and all, but there really wasn't that much money in the program, so it didn't really serve that many people. So that, you know, that's where I'm going.
Sure,
Anyway, thank you, I appreciate.
absolutely.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith, are you on and able to speak? Did you have any further questions? Okay, then we'll move on. Any other questions, second round from members? I have a few. Let's see. So one of the issues that I've heard a complaint about, and this is a topic we have yet to bring up tonight, is if there's one thing I've heard about the program since its inception in 2018 that people most object to, it's the fee for changing a cart.
Okay.
And so I wonder if the administration would be amenable to waiving the fee if somebody is downsizing their cart because they're using less trash.
There's a cost to it. So there's the cost of actually physically going and getting the old cart and taking the new cart. So
Okay, well, let's slow down here. So why is there a cost? I mean, first you have to buy a new cart, or
yes, yeah,
can the old cart not be used by another household?
it can be, but we have to have the inventory of carts to exchange it. So there's the cost of the new cart.
Okay,
There's the cost of the staff and the fuel and the.
but it's not really a new cart. They're swapping out. I mean, they're getting a certain amount of plastic, and they're changing it to a different amount of plastic, but they're still getting a cart. So aren't they exchanging a cart of some value for a cart of some value?
To an extent, yes, but we have to have that other inventory to be able to make the exchange. Some of the we do keep an inventory at all times just for the carts that get broken or whatnot, but there is a cost to the exchange fee, to the service of an exchange. Would we be amenable to waiving it for a period of time to allow folks to consider changes? I'm hesitant there because what we experienced in 2017 was a huge volume of switch outs very early on in the program. When we delivered so if you recall, if you didn't choose a cart size, you got the default minimum size. When those all got delivered, I'd have to pull the numbers, but I think we made something like 1,500 or 1,600 exchanges from 64 to 35. We ran out of 35s, had to buy more, and then we ended up with a bunch of 64s.
Okay.
So we've got a big inventory of 64s. We've got a very little inventory of 35s. So if you want to go to the 35, it's more than likely we're going to have to buy a new cart. And we don't have the least amount of users are in the 96-gallon category, so we're not going to see a big decrease from 96 to 64, reusing all of the new carts that are made available as 64s because of the exchange.
So you're saying that we have a glut of 64-gallon carts?
We're probably going to auction some of them through gov deals, yes.
Okay. Nevertheless, you see, my point is that in an effort to incentivize
Sure.
reduction of trash,
Yeah.
Reduction of effort, like that fee is a deterrent. And I also, it's not 2017 anymore. The program's been operating normally for 5-6 years. Under what circumstance do we expect to see a dramatic number of changes in carts?
We had an uptick on the first media coverage of these possible rate changes.
An uptick, meaning?
In requests to go from a 64 to a 35. I can get those numbers.
I mean, that's good, isn't it?
To an extent, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's good. It also changes the revenue forecasts and models. It also changes the amount of cost we have in making those deliveries and exchanges. But
Well,
sure.
that's the next question then. What percentage of the sanitation budget is just coming from fees for carts or fees for cart exchanges?
Oh, a very low percent. Less than 1 is my
So
guess.
then why is it such a big deal? Why is that small fee, if it's very low? It's like fares on the buses. Maybe 6% of our revenues come from buses, bus fares. I mean, can we consider having holidays where during this window it's free to change carts, or you can change cart for the first year after you're newly occupying an address to see if you need bigger or smaller?
I would be open to considering and exploring that more, yes.
Okay. Do I have any other questions from members? Seeing none, we're going to go to the public for comment on Ordinance 2311. If you would please put out the call on Zoom for people who might like to comment.
Yes, happily. If there are members of the public that would like to speak to this ordinance, please let us know by using the raise hand feature, which you can find in your control bar under the reactions button or the more button. You can also send a chat to the meeting host to let us know you'd like to speak.
If you go ahead and state your name, and please, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Council. This is Christopher M.G., not of the Chamber. The name tag is away. This is as a Sunny Slope citizen homeowner of 11 years. First of all, I want to thank Adam Wason for the presentation, very informative. He is worth the pay grade of the public works that he's getting. He does a fine job, and sanitation does a fine job. When they modernized 6 years ago, I think it was a great deal for the city. I've been really impressed with the service, but at that time, I thought it was a little low as far as the costs go. So it just seems like odd timing that all of a sudden this $1 million subsidy that we're paying into it is a problem, which should have kind of been done with the lid increase at that time. I mean, we are asking philosophical questions, and I'll repeat what Mr. Wason said is, how much should the general fund be to subsidize garbage and recycling collection? Well, I think we can all agree that recycling should be subsidized and we should be promoted, and maybe some other food waste and some other means of lowering our trash, but that's what it comes down to. And I think the sticker shock is where I think we were a little bit too low in those charges when we modernized 6 years ago. And now all of a sudden we're hearing, why should we, the subsidy's too big. Well, I mean, it's just an odd timing issue that I have. I don't have any problems paying more. I think we probably should be paying more. And I think the structure we have as far as the gallons is very constructive and one that I think has been really, really well thought out. It's just how much we should be doing that right away. I think we have to ask ourselves, is that essential, especially after that lid increase, a year ago. So I don't really have an opinion myself on where you should on the 5 options. I just, an increase definitely has been proven by Mr. Wason as far as costs go, and then you need a philosophical discussion on what should that subsidy be from the general fund. I don't have that answer, but that answer should come in due time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go now to Zoom. Is there anybody on Zoom who'd like to comment on Ordinance 2311?
Not that I see at this time, no.
We'll go back to the chambers. Please state your name. You'll have 3 minutes.
Dave Astons with the B Square Bulletin. I wanted to start by following up on a question that Councilmember Flaherty asked about the possibility of an automatic escalation of the range endpoints that is keyed to CPI or something. So why really is there a range at all? So a related question, is there any mechanism in the ordinance to ensure that future increases approved by Public Works, the Board of Public Works that is, that ensures that there's in some sense proportional? That is, what prevents the Board of Public Works from maintaining the 35-gallon cart rate at the low end of the range and increasing the 96-gallon size to the maximum? I mean, I don't think they would do that, but why would we want to set things up so that's even a possibility? Why not just have an automatic escalator every year for a given price point per cart? Sort of a second kind of question, what is the logic behind making the rate progressive with respect to the amount per gallon? So the new rate structures are in fact progressive, the old ones were not. So I understand that income tax is done on a progressive scale, and there's a logic and a rationale to that, but this is not income tax, this is trash. So if you compare a one-person household to, say, a 5-member unrelated adult household living in, I don't know, some kind of communal setting, I guess, where the one-person household uses a 35-gallon cart and the 5-person household uses a 96-gallon cart, each member of the 5-member household, even though they're generating way less trash per person, is going to pay a lot more per gallon than the one person in the one-person household. So it seems like it's making an odd judgment about household size. Following up on a remark about from Director Wason, that recycling isn't free. Well, of course that's right, but it's my understanding that the conscious policy choice in the past was not to charge city trash customers for their curbside recycling. And in fact, I think that could be the basic explanation for why the level of the subsidy turns out to be roughly $1 million and not some other number. This relates to Councilmember Flaherty's question, why is it $1 million? When we pick that number out of the air, that's acceptable. I think it's acceptable because that's the rough equivalent of what it takes to run the recycling operation. So back of the napkin, it looks to me like the 50% proposal that Director Wason has put forward would completely cover the cost of trash collection, but would maintain a subsidy for curbside recycling. So it would be great to get confirmation of that, or if that's not right, then it would be great to get a breakdown of what the required rate increase would be to cover the whole cost of trash collection. And wow, I didn't talk quite fast enough. Dang.
Thank you for your comments. Any further comments from members on Zoom?
No, not that I see.
Any further comments in the chamber? Seeing none, we'll come back to the council for further questions. Seeing none, we'll go to comments on ordinance 2311. To my left? To my right? I guess it's me then. Councilmember Rallo asked a question about reopening the landfill. I have always believed that it would be good to reopen the landfill for the same reason that any logic behind us doing sanitation is good, that it would allow us to control the means of disposal and it would be publicly accountable. Most importantly, the landfill would be closer and it would reduce our carbon footprint. However, it was a painful experience of my very first month on council that the landfill caught fire. And after a series of violations preceding that fire, it was the last straw. The landfill has been closed permanently since mid-2004. And the effort to re-permit it, to open it from item would be, I don't want to call it extraordinary, but it would be very significant. And while I do favor it, I don't know how we would get it done. I will point out, though, that Rumpke is now offering the services of a second transfer station here in the county, and they are transporting the garbage they collect to their landfill in Medora, which is, I want to say, 36 miles away from Bloomington, or 37 maybe, whereas the Sycamore Ridge landfill, where we're currently having our trash hauled, is 66 miles away. So just from that perspective, it seems like we're going to have an interest in seeing the bid that Rumpke comes up with. But I also want to point out that sanitation is a collective term, even though they're doing services like trash and recycling. People are still paying for one thing, they're not paying a la carte, if you'll forgive the pun. In the same way that while we have 3 different rates for wastewater, water, and stormwater, utility still sends one bill and you have to pay one bill. We don't break out those prices. But I did want to answer Councilmember Smith's question about why the general fund subsidy is an issue. We had a similar issue with parking, although for the different nature of the solution. For 30 years, we, for what's the past tense of forbore parking meters. And the demand was so through the roof for parking that when we put meters in 30 years later, there was not a significant reduction in the use of parking, but there were 2.2 million hours of parking paid for in the first year. That's been a pretty consistent number. It's only gone up since then. That's the demand for parking, and we haven't raised rates in 10 years, and we need to be thinking about that too. But this program has taken 5 or 6 years to reach equilibrium. We were, when Mr. Wason has been consistently reminding us of 2017, and we were supposed to be reevaluating in 2020, and then the pandemic struck, and so it's taken a while to figure out, and we found a new equilibrium for a while with an increase in home trash that the city took a responsibility for. But this is the right time to reevaluate that subsidy. I think that it's like the question that Councilmember Flaherty asked is legitimate. The service isn't paying for itself, and people who have to pay for private hauling through their apartment or what have you, who don't have the benefit of it, are subsidizing the single-family homes that do get the service. We've always known that it's cost more to provide service than we've been charging. So, I think it's time to reckon with that cost. If for no other reason than to answer Councilmember Rallo's question, well, it's important that we get organic material out of the waste stream. We could be using the money that's going to the subsidy to pay to set up, to make composting as easy as possible for us to collect composting by curbside, okay? So it's not so much that we're subsidizing the sanitation program, it's what services we're offering in the program that we're subsidizing. That if we're gonna subsidize anything, we should subsidize getting organic material out of the waste stream. So I'm interested in some kind of carve-out that takes some portion of the increase in fees and mandates that it be used to compost more or to remove organic material from the waste stream. And I'm going to work on an amendment like that over the next week. Maybe Councilmember Flaherty will join me in it, but I think that it's overdue that we address it. So I appreciate the conversation we've had tonight. It's been very important. Thanks to Mr. Wason for do you have a comment? Okay. Well, I just want to finish up and say that thanks to Mr. Wason for the presentation. It is enlightening, and I think that he is absolutely right. This is not his call. This ordinance is here because it's our call. We have to decide what policy is going to be. Councilmember Sandberg.
It is our call, and I'm not real clear what it is we're going to be voting up or down in this committee of the whole. 5 options were presented, and no one really has been able to articulate what option we might prefer, so I think it clearly needs more work. So I'll be passing this evening. I had lunch today with Ryan Conway, who, of course, they just recently discontinued their work with composting with Earth Keepers. And he shared with me their final reports, and it simply was not sustainable to be able to do that business in addition to their own farming operation. And so we can all wish for things. We wish we had better means for composting, but until we can come up with a sustainable program that actually makes sense for someone to provide for the community, I think what we're faced with is dealing with the fact that sanitation is a public good. So this talk about equity and it's not fair for certain people who don't get the benefit of it, but yet who are still paying taxes, I'm not buying that argument, because picking up our garbage and our trash is a common good. It's a public good. And it's something that I think the public has the lion's share of the responsibility to make sure as many households as we can possibly accommodate get their garbage picked up, because without that, it is not a sanitation, we don't have sanitation in the city, which is good for everybody. So to the extent that we do subsidize it as a public good, I believe in that. I think we should do everything in our power to keep the costs down for consumers. These have been tough years for people, very tough years. We've been through a pandemic. Costs are going up. We're in a world of food costs going up. We have raised income taxes, property taxes have gone up, my home insurance went up, and people are on fixed incomes. And I think we do have a responsibility to our constituents to be mindful of everything we can do to contain the cost, to be efficient, and to not keep adding fee after fee after fee. We're being asked again for our school system to ask for another referendum. And at what point do we tap our people to a point where it becomes unsustainable for them. So I find myself in a dilemma. If I were to support any of the 5 options, it would be the first one that continues a public subsidy for sanitation as a public good with as minimal amount of a fee increase as we can possibly inflict on the public. But at this point, I think this needs a lot more work and a lot more consideration for something specific to be put on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments from members? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yeah. First of all, just utility services are not public goods. Just definitionally, they are not public goods in economics terms. If they were public goods, it'd be pretty funny that, I think we mean public benefit of some kind, but it's funny that if we think that's the case and so important that we only give that to a subset of the members of our community and decide to exclude others from that. That's the equity issue. It's not that we don't want affordable rates for everyone. It's that some people are being actively excluded and they are cross-subsidizing the others. That's the equity issue. So that's it. Thanks. Oh, also just, we don't have to take a do pass recommendation of any kind. I don't think that's required. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Lucas.
That's correct. That's correct. Further comments from members? Mr. Lucas.
No correction on that point. I did just want to point out, as written, the ordinance includes rates that would reflect a 50% reduction in the general fund support for sanitation services. So without any amendments, that's the ordinance that's in front of you. So any do pass recommendation would be on that price, those price ranges.
Second, we're on, is there second round comments? Any comments? I have a couple. I agree about the idea of public goods. Should we keep costs down for consumers? Certainly we should be trying to, but we, more importantly, are supposed to be ensuring the general welfare for all citizens, regardless of whether they are consumers or not. We're not just here to be consumer advocates. The citizens of Bloomington are not merely consumers. But I do want to point out that under this proposal, and according to Mr. Wason, the typical private cost of sanitation to a single-family home is around $36 a month. Well, we keep getting distracted by the 96-gallon figure in the new chart, which is right around $36. That's the 50% thing. But we also heard from Mr. Wason that the vast majority of people have the smallest cart. So for most people, they're getting sanitation service at 1/3 of the cost of private hauling. That's great. And I take the idea that in multifamily housing, there's going to be some more efficiencies. But there are new costs involved with an apartment building managing trash. The point that Mr. Flaherty is making, I think, is that everyone in the city should be able to benefit from, even if we raised the rates to the maximum, eliminate the general fund subsidy altogether, the 35-gallon cart is going to be the one that most people take, and that's, what was the price on it, $13? I don't have it in front of me now. But it was still much, much lower than the cost of private hauling. And every citizen in the city should benefit from it. So yeah, no, I too don't want to end sanitation. Either we expand it to everybody and we start taking on all trash hauling in the city, or we eliminate the part that the people in the city who don't get to benefit from it are also having to pay the subsidy. With that, I'll entertain a motion on the ordinance. Is there a motion to pass? Seeing none. The council rises and reports with no recommendation to the full council. And that concludes our agenda for the evening. I will declare this meeting adjourned.